Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our lead investigator hats, and we're going to dive deep into the dark, completely fascinating, and strictly physical science behind how seemingly mundane situations suddenly transform into inescapable traps. We'll be opening up real case files to understand the exact mechanisms, the physical and chemical phenomena that can turn a totally ordinary day into a point of no return. So let's dig into the evidence. Now, for all of you thrill seekers and curious minds out there, you might be wondering, how does an everyday activity actually become a fatal trap? Well, what we're looking at today isn't about malicious intent. It's about the hidden variables all around us. Tragedies, they often hide in plain sight. Moving into a new apartment, taking a family road trip, going to a spa with friends. These are completely normal events, right? But they can harbor unseen dangers, just waiting for a critical knowledge gap to be crossed. When people unknowingly walk into truly deadly situations, it's usually just because they don't understand the physical science at play until it's far, far too late.
All right, let's open Case File 1, Fatal Buoyancy and the Whirlpool.
Our setting is Penzance, over in the UK, where this harmless-looking harbor drainage system created a really powerful seasonal whirlpool. Now, this was just a quirk of engineering designed to keep the harbor from silting up, but it generated a pull so strong it came with plenty of caution signs. The victim drawn to it was 28-year-old Jacob Cochell. Jacob was an incredible talent, literally a National Geographic award-winning photographer with a massive bright future. But, driven to take massive risks after the tragic loss of his older sister, Grace, Jacob decided he needed to live life to the absolute fullest for the both of them. He wanted this viral YouTube shot, so he jumped into this dangerous harbor whirlpool while wearing a rubber horsehead mask, having his friend David film the whole stunt from above. So, what went wrong? Well, the actual physics of buoyancy is what turned this stunt into a trap. Jacob was an experienced freediver, and initially, he was floating on top of the whirlpool perfectly fine because he had a buoyant wetsuit on. But for his final shot, he dove down. And here's the catch. As you go deeper underneath the water pressure pushes against the wetsuit. It compresses the material, dramatically reducing its overall ability to keep you afloat. Once Jacob lost that buoyancy, he simply couldn't fight the current. He was sucked directly into the underwater drainage tunnel and drowned. It's wild to think about, but a simple misunderstanding of pressure and buoyancy turned a YouTube stunt into an absolute tragedy. Moving on to Case File 2, Mechanical Deception, the Elevator. Our victim here is Carrie O'Connor. Carrie was a brilliant 38-year-old who had this intense love of learning. She held a PhD and had just achieved her absolute dream, a hard-earned, full-time professorship at Boston University. She had literally just sent a passionate, enthusiastic email out to her new students titled The Joy of Learning French. Her future was incredibly bright. Yet, the mundane objects that ended it all were just a heavy, 80-pound unbuilt furniture package measuring 7 feet tall and her new apartment building's vintage, manually operated elevator. Let's walk through this mechanical deception step by step. To understand this trap, you really have to know how this old elevator worked. It had an outer hoistway door and an inner car gate, and both had to be fully shut for the elevator to even move. Carrie wedged her massive package inside, but the top of the box inadvertently pressed against the sensor right at the top of the door frame. This totally tricked the elevator into thinking the inner gate was closed and secured. Meanwhile, down in the basement, a maintenance worker pressed the call button, and the elevator began to move while Carrie's door was still wide open. As she struggled with this awkward shifting 80-pound box, it hit the sensor again. With tragic inevitability, she lost her balance, fell backward out of the elevator, and that prematurely moving car pulled her straight down into the narrow, fatal hoistway shaft. Which brings us to Case File 3, Structural Collapse, the Furnace. Let's shift our investigation way back to Thanksgiving Day, 1900, in San Francisco. 18-year-old Thomas Peddler and his friend Charles were among this massive crowd of 20,000 fans trying to watch a highly anticipated, completely sold-out college football game between Stanford and the University of California. Lacking tickets, Thomas, Charles, and hundreds of other desperate fans sought a free vantage point. They placed ladders against a neighboring 5-story white brick factory building, literally free climbing fire escapes to reach the flat roof, 55 feet off the ground. The crowd up there was cheering, jumping around, totally chaotic. Then came the point of no return. The roof gave way. The floor completely collapsed under their weight, dropping the spectators directly into the interior of the factory. The true nightmare unfolds when we look at the drop zones. Some victims, including Thomas, fell or caught onto beams near the outer floor, suffering a brutal 55-foot drop to concrete. But Charles and about 20 others, they only fell 15 feet onto a large brick structure right in the center of the factory. Thomas initially thought Charles was the lucky one to survive the shorter fall. But here is the shocking thermal physics of the situation. This was a glass factory. That inner brick structure they landed on was actually an active glass furnace running at over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. To put that into perspective, the exterior was so phenomenally hot that the victims who landed on it instantly ignited upon impact. 23 people died in what is still one of the worst disasters in sports history, all while the crowd outside just continued cheering, completely oblivious to the horror inside. Let's open Case File 4, Dead End, the Snowstorm. Guys, this is perhaps the most emotionally devastating case we have today. James and Katie Kim, returning home to San Francisco after a Thanksgiving trip with their 4-year-old daughter Penelope and 7-month-old daughter Sabine, made a fateful wrong turn. What started as just a simple navigation error onto a steep, unmaintained logging road called Bear Camp Road quickly escalated into an agonizing battle for survival. A brutal snowstorm trapped their car. Day after day passed, no plows, no cell service. By day 4, they ran entirely out of gas. By day 6, driven by an intense, desperate love for his daughters, James pulled the tires off their car and burned them, along with magazines and even Penelope's prized stuffed lamb, just trying to create a smoke signal. The stakes in this case are so incredibly urgent because they're anchored entirely in their family bond. By Thursday, looking at their freezing, silent children, Katie made a heartbreaking plea to James. She looked at him and said, "You have to promise me. If our 2 kids die out here, you have to kill me too." It was exactly this moment of sheer desperation that pushed James to realize nobody was coming for them, and he was going to have to make the ultimate sacrifice to find help. The brutal physical reality James faced came down to one single number: 16. That's 16 miles. He left the car wearing nothing but street clothes and sneakers. He hiked 16 miles, zigzagging through deep ravines, crossing freezing rivers, and navigating incredibly treacherous mountain terrain. He ultimately succumbed to hypothermia and died in the wilderness. But he deliberately left bits of torn clothing and footprints in the snow behind him as he walked. A helicopter pilot spotted those exact footprints, traced them backward, and found the clearing where Katie and the 2 girls were trapped. His sacrifice literally saved their lives. And finally, Case File 5, Invisible Chemistry, Dry Ice. For this one, we traveled to a spa in Moscow, Russia, in early 2020. It was the 29th birthday party for a popular Instagram influencer named Ekaterina Didenko. What was absolutely supposed to be a fun, social media-worthy celebration turned into an accidental, self-inflicted chemical chamber. To create a viral, spooky fog effect for their followers, Ekaterina's husband wheeled in a massive picnic cooler containing roughly 55 pounds of dry ice. The partygoers even put on white hazmat suits, not for actual safety, mind you, but just because it looked cool for the aesthetics of the video. They then took that entire 55 pounds of dry ice and dumped it directly into the warm water of this small, poorly ventilated indoor pool. The invisible chemistry here bridged their knowledge gap far, far too late. You see, dry ice doesn't melt into a liquid. It sublimates. It goes directly from solid carbon dioxide into a gas. When 55 pounds of it hit that warm water, it caused a massive, immediate explosion of CO2 gas. Now, carbon dioxide is heavier than air, so it rapidly displaces oxygen, pushing it right out of the way. When Ekaterina's husband and 2 friends enthusiastically jumped into the pool, they surfaced into a heavy, thick cloud of pure, poisonous carbon dioxide. Instead of oxygen, they took a massive lungful of CO2, resulting in immediate loss of consciousness and, tragically, death. So, as we close this explainer, I really want you to take a second and look around. What hidden, everyday variables surround you right now? Whether it's the simple physics of a heavy box resting on a sensor, the crazy thermodynamics of a factory right below your feet, or the chemical properties of an innocuous little party trick, our world operates on strict, unforgiving physical laws. Are you absolutely certain you understand the mechanics of your own environment? Or is tragedy just one misunderstood variable away? Think about it. Stay curious,